Welcome to Slalom Supply Chain Fireside Chat. I'm your host Harshad Kanvinde, leader of Slalom's global supply chain practice. In today's episode, our guest is Christian Pillar, Vice President of Value Engineering at supply chain startup Project 44. We talk about importance of visibility for agile supply chains, current trends and challenges, and predictions for the future. Welcome everyone to the Slalom Fireside Chat. Today our guest is Christian Pillar, my friend, ex-colleague, and a deep expert in supply chain visibility space. Christian, welcome. I would start with asking you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can start our chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Harshad. It's been a while since you and I were colleagues at Amazon, but glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As you said, I'm Christian Pillar. I'm Vice President of Value Engineering at Project 44. Prior to Project 44, I spent 4 years at Amazon, where Harshad and I worked together for a little bit. A year or two of that, I spent leading large pieces of North America inbound transportation. I had about a year role doing kind of a global supply chain optimization role, and then several months leading different pieces of what's now called Amazon Relay. We're externalizing Amazon's transportation services. Prior to that, I spent time at Grainger, so I've mostly been on the B2B and B2C retail side.
It's always great to talk to you, Christian, and specifically, I think all the exciting things that are going on in the world of supply chain, and the time that you have spent in transportation in a variety of different roles, and companies like Amazon and now Project 44, paving out ways in pioneer in many dimensions in the space of visibility in supply chain. So let's spend some time today talking about visibility. We have been chatting offline quite a bit about that, but as you know, I think at Slalom, our focus is also on agility in supply chain and how visibility aids that agility. So by agility, we mean flexibility, responsiveness, speed in decision making in supply chain, and visibility, as we see it, as a cornerstone of achieving agility. And you are in the business of visibility. So I wanted to ask you the core question about how do you see visibility? How do you see visibility as evolving, that concept, visibility in supply chain? What Project 44 is doing, and how your thinking has evolved over the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's really two questions inside of that is what is visibility, and then what is agility in supply chain. So visibility is really knowing where your shipments are in real time with a high degree of accuracy. This high fidelity data can be put back into numerous systems of record, be it a TMS, to make those systems more efficient. The where's my shipment problem, or where's my shipment question, which has historically been answered with legacy technology like EDI or manual track and trace processes like email, spreadsheets, phone calls, that's all easy to answer today. Visibility is not the end, it's the beginning. So I think the next step in a digitization journey would be agility. Agility is the outcome of visibility, or an outcome of visibility. So it's what one does with that high fidelity data and the more efficient system outcomes. So potential outcomes of that: more effective planning, proactive disruption notifications, higher performance, lower cost, improved customer experience. Those are all outcomes of agility, but a buyer of visibility and a user of that data has to actively want to use that visibility data to have a more agile supply chain. They have to plan for it. They have to think about it. So visibility should really be thought of as the first step in the digitization journey, not the end. It's just the beginning.
Absolutely, it's foundational, and as you said, a lot depends on you got visibility, now what you do with it. But let me ask, maybe taking an alternative view or from the other side, what kind of things have you seen, and let's talk like your current role, value engineering at Project 44. As you talk to the customers, what kind of things or symptoms they want to alleviate, and what's their why they want to start their journey on the visibility in the first place.
Yeah, I have a cool role because I get to talk to some of the largest, most sophisticated companies in the world. So that's exciting. What I see mostly is that visibility, the need for visibility or the want for visibility, doesn't vary much by sector. All the sectors are buying visibility. I do think if someone pressed me that I'd say retail is a little bit further ahead of other sectors in terms of visibility or their end-to-end digitization journey. I think most of that is because customer experience is really important. That's something that, was drilled into me at Amazon. I think it's really important. As you know, as a former colleague there, customer experience is really important. I think the other piece is demand moving from in-store to online. And this transition from in-store to online isn't new, but I do think it was accelerated with COVID in the homebody economy. And I think that retailers sat back and said, wow, we really need to do something to improve customer experience, like emails, spreadsheets. These things can't keep up. And then this global disruption most people didn't think it could happen or it wouldn't happen to them. But now that it has happened, I think all transportation and supply chain professionals globally are rethinking, what's my next 5-year, 10-year strategy? How do I change? I can't keep doing what I did for the past 5 to 10 years to keep up with all the changes that are happening in the world. So in a sense, it's really moving from what was a luxury or nice to have to a must have.
And maybe going back to the previous point that you made, the technology for visibility. So I think people have been using EDIs for a long time, and to some fashion, I think some manual processes to get more visibility into transportation and warehousing and so on. So do you see differences? There were some companies who were so focused on customer experience. I mean, Amazon is an example, but I'm sure that there are many others in your customer base that they understood the need for visibility really well. And regardless of what stage of maturity technology is, they were doing a lot of different things to gain visibility to fulfill their customer promises. And then there were customers who are probably are just starting that journey. So overall, in different companies that you deal with, what do you see that the best in class, there are cultural elements there, that culturally they're attuned to giving better customer experience, and they will do whatever it takes to gain visibility, technologically advanced or not. So let's hear some comments on that. What's your experience working with all these different varieties of different companies? Who does well, who are just starting, and without naming the names, of course, but what do you see as key traits?
Yeah, so customer experience is one, the need to improve customer experience. So beyond that, I think there are a few things to think about. One is that over the last 5 to 10 years, the visibility technology and thought process behind it have advanced. So technology-wise, now visibility providers can integrate to all modes globally and do it quickly. The leading ones can. 5 to 10 years ago, there were visibility providers, but they were focused on ocean. They were focused on truckload. Those data signals and those shipment identifiers didn't necessarily talk to each other. So now the leading providers can provide visibility to all modes globally in a single portal, and the ability to put that high fidelity data back into a customer's system of record of choice. Meaning that a company like Project 44 is really agnostic to who we partner with. We want to make sure that we're providing the data and customer experience for our customers so they can provide the data and customer experience for their customers. And that's really what I think, visibility as a foundation for digitization is all about. I think the second piece is something we've already talked about. Traction is accelerated because of this disruption of global supply chains. And then, companies are realizing more and more that they need to digitize, and that visibility is that first step. So you asked me specifically about some companies and what they're doing. I don't want to name names, of course, but they are, global brands, brands we use every day, brands that help make our lives better. So there's examples of our customers saying, well, I'm a sophisticated global shipper. I have freight on airplanes and ocean vessels all over the world. I have truckload in 50 different countries. I use LTL. I use small parcel. I have 100 different carriers. Those are the companies that we're helping solve their problems. They want to know if a ship leaves China, transits the Pacific Ocean, comes to California, and it's put on a train to Kansas City, that we can track that. And then whatever was on that ocean vessel was put in that train and was unloaded in Kansas City. Now it's being put into a box and shipped to a customer's house, and we can track that. What that means for that shipper is that each touch point, each mode of transportation, they can see in a single pane of glass. And that data, their transportation management system can contemplate. So it makes their transportation management system more effective. It makes their other planning systems more effective. And that's really how customers get to agility, how they get to higher performance and lower cost, knowing that, you know, a box of coffee cups is stuck in a snowstorm in Chicago is interesting, but like, what do you do with it? That just enables you to answer the question to frustrated stakeholders faster, but it doesn't actually solve your question of, should we have shipped those coffee cups from somewhere else? Should we have known that our truck was going to be delayed transiting Chicago? So now we have to let our customers in Wisconsin know, hey, we're sorry, you're not going to be able to get your coffee cups. And that's what's possible with the digitization journey.
So are you, that's a great point, right? So the coffee cups being stuck somewhere, you can answer that question, where is my stuff, faster, but that doesn't really solve the problem for the customer or the company. So in terms of, I think I got this visibility, or maybe some companies already have the vision. Once I get the visibility, this is how the way I operate my supply chain changes. Are you seeing top of the class companies doing some of those kind of things to move toward agility already, or on their way there? Let's take that coffee cup example, right? So I understand where it is, but what should I have done to not get into that situation in the first place? Or maybe how should I thought about my transportation differently? Are there companies doing that already?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is like inbound transportation. And, you know, most retailers are going to have 50% of their inbound be collect and 50% be prepaid. There's always a gap, not in inbound collect, there's a gap. That's email and spreadsheets, right? But prepaid, I think there's an even bigger gap, and it's more challenging for the consignee to solve just because they don't own the transportation. So if you're a company that has 50% of your freight be collect, 50% of your inbound freight be collect, and 50% of your inbound freight be prepaid, you can buy visibility that solves the problem, the visibility problem for the 50% that's collect. But how do you solve the visibility problem for the 50% that's prepaid? And now, if you solve that problem, you have 100% visibility to your inbound transportation. And then you can rethink distribution center processes, receive processes. What can I have on my shelf? You could also rethink lanes. You could rethink which supplier should be prepaid versus collect. There's a company, there are a few companies here in the US, but there's one company in particular that has tens of thousands of retail stores, and they have thousands of suppliers. They're working on right now with Project 44 getting inbound prepaid visibility by extending Project 44 to their prepaid suppliers. So now this retailer has full inbound visibility of all freight inbound and collect into their network. That allows them to more effectively plan. And then you think downstream towards their stores, store replenishments, when freight's available at their stores, better staffing at their stores. All of those things go to better customer experience for their customers that visit them in the store, as well as lower cost and higher performance. And that's an example of something beyond visibility. That's getting to the point of agility and understanding. Well, you know, we'll go back to that coffee cup example quickly. Well, the coffee cups were from a collect supplier. Who are my prepaid suppliers that can provide me exactly what I need, and what's, you know, kind of the cost of them and their performance. Now I have the data to make that decision, where I may not have had it before, or it would have took me numerous emails and spreadsheets passed through a series of analysts.
That's fascinating. So, and I think back in the Amazon days, we worked on a lot of these things, and the world is catching on. Probably, I think that might not be an overstatement.
Yeah.
Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about end-to-end supply chain visibility. I think you mentioned there were already people working on the ocean visibility, and now a lot is happening on the ground transportation side. But if you look at a typical, let's say a retailer, fashion retailer, manufacturing in China, sending shipments over the ocean, processing in the port of entry, and then on the onward to the distribution centers and the retail stores. Through that entire chain, as you think about visibility just in the transportation piece, what pieces are still challenging? And technologically, from process standpoint, where are the black holes that it's still challenging to get insights into what's happening?
You know, for a retailer, it's tough to say because we've seen some variance, but ocean's typically a problem. Air can also be a problem. But we can talk about, you know, final mile, delivering to the customer, actually having a network of 20, 50, 100 couriers that are an alternative to the mainstays of small parcel transportation like FedEx and UPS. That's an interesting black hole, a challenge for many retailers. And some retailers start off with saying, well, that's my problem statement. That's the visibility I want to buy. Others look at it and say, well, I'm looking to improve my end-to-end visibility. So let's get progress towards as many modes globally as possible. Start from there, and then, you know, walk down the digitization journey. Another example of where I think a black hole still is LTL here in the US. It's a manual, paper-based process. Like, I think the LTL carriers do a fantastic job with what they're given, but you can't digitize a paper-based process unless all the data signals and standards are there. So, you know, particularly here in the US, I think a black hole that still needs to be digitized, that it's something Project 44 is working on with 20 to 25 of our partners, is digitizing an entire industry. And once we're able to digitize the industry that supports visibility for a retailer, for example, then we're able to provide better visibility for that retailer, and they are able to improve that experience for their customers.
That's amazing. Let's drill down into you mentioned LTL. That's one of the problems, and I think so far the journey has been visibility is top of mind. Many people are doing a lot of things around visibility. Once you get visibility, agility becomes possible. Obviously, there are cultural elements, what companies do with the visibility, another set of challenges. But purely from the technical standpoint, there are certain black holes. So LTL that you mentioned, the industry is fragmented, right? So if you look at the transportation as a whole, so it's a gigantic effort. Maybe Project 44 is better positioned. Maybe there are some other competitors who are kind of trying to crack that nut. But you said that the entire industry, how to get that industry on a digital path, that's going to be one of the key things that you guys need to do. What stage is that effort in? I mean, are you seeing a lot of traction with LTL providers? There is already tailwinds that's going to make this possible in coming years, or is going to be a long haul to transform that industry?
So there's something called the Digital LTL Council, which Project 44 co-founded with a few other leading transportation companies. And there's 25 members currently representing carriers, shippers, technology providers, the largest LTL carriers in the country, many of the names you might expect. We've been working on it since September 2019. So we have to map out the problem, right? So like, what's the value for the carriers? What's the value for the shippers? Where are all the disconnections, or, you know, I guess wet pieces of paper towel that need to be sewn together. And that's really a little bit what it's like with the LTL industry, but we're getting closer. I think we're maybe a month or two away from releasing our first standard for the broader industry. And that's going to be the first path towards digitizing the LTL industry. And it's an example of where we need to digitize an industry first before we can remove the black holes for a shipper. And, Project 44 and many other companies are committed to doing that. Because again, you can't digitize a manual process. You have to digitize that process first, and then you can get visibility into it for people that need that visibility.
Makes sense. I think that brings another very important point, Christian. So we talked about the incentives for shippers. Why visibility matter? Kind of fairly straightforward equation. I get visibility, I can serve my customers better, I can change the way I operate my supply chain, and I don't have the coffee mug stuck in the winter storm. Probably that problem. What's in it for the carriers? Because I think some of the arguments that I've heard from many different players is transparency. I think in general transparency is good for the shippers. Transparency might create some interesting challenges for the carriers. So are you seeing pushback from the carriers, or maybe general commentary on what do you think are the incentives? How do you incentivize the carriers to play along?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways to answer that question. So one, I've never seen carriers be hesitant to improve customer experience. So, a retailer that's shipping a shirt has customer experience to worry about. A carrier is also a sophisticated company that has customers, so they want to improve customer experience. I think probably where some of that sentiment comes from might be a misunderstanding of the challenges that carriers face. So talk about LTL carriers in particular. What are the different appointment scheduling challenges or processes by pickup location? So if I'm an LTL carrier, a retailer sends me to one of 50 suppliers and says, go pick up from that supplier. The freight payer, being the retailer that sent me to go pick up from their 50 suppliers, doesn't necessarily know the pickup appointment scheduling process at each one of those 50 suppliers. Their planning doesn't contemplate when freight is released. Their planning doesn't necessarily contemplate first available pickup appointment. I, as the LTL carrier, have to manage all of that. And each one of those 50 suppliers has a different process, be it manual or more manual. Most of them aren't digital. So that's a challenge for the LTL carriers that they solve on behalf of their customer. So they do that every day, and I think they do it pretty effectively, but they want to digitize because it enables them to be more operationally efficient. So let's talk about the benefits for the carrier. One, they can improve customer experience because they don't keep on getting hit over the head with the freight payer's request. Why didn't you pick up? You were late. My supplier said you weren't there. Going through those challenges of kind of whose fault was it, supplier or carrier. But for the carrier, they plan their nightly line haul network, say by 4 p.m. daily, to the best of their ability. They don't get all the freight back to their docks until 6 p.m. So they have 2 hours to see and sort the freight before they put it on line hauls going to other terminals. It's difficult for them to plan their line hauls based on what signals and data they're getting from those suppliers or from the freight payer that sent them to pick up but doesn't necessarily own packing the freight. So there's challenges that the LTL carriers have there. Those challenges generally manifest themselves in dry runs, in less than fully utilized trailers, and inefficient line hauls. As the carriers are able to get better data to improve their routes, reduce dry runs, improve trailer utilization, and improve line haul network efficiency, they get a lift in their OR, which they can then pass to the shipper in terms of rate reductions or escaping of GRIs. So carriers definitely want to do that. I've seen them invest in it. I know they want to do that. When I think about the Digital LTL Council, the most passionate people about customer experience and the need to change the industry are usually the LTL carriers themselves.
That's fabulous. Now that there is a follow-up question coming. So now the LTL Council and all the movement that you're seeing in the US. Let's talk global. So other advanced countries, let's say Western Europe or Japan and other Asia Pac countries, as well as the emerging markets. Um, I think you have experience in pretty much all the markets, Christian. So let's it would be a crime not to talk about that. It would be super beneficial for the audience. But as you see all these other geographies, other locales, what differences do you see? How the industry is set up, even if you focus on LTL or full truckload kind of carriers, what challenges do you see in terms of visibility in those other markets?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So aside from, other black holes or other industries and modes needing to digitize by country, like the Digital LTL Council in the US, you can apply that to other industries and modes globally. One of the best ways to affect tracking or visibility is connecting to GPS style devices, be it electronic logging devices here in the United States, telematics in the European Union, or IoT sensors. Those are really the best ways to connect. There are other ways to connect and provide visibility. The challenge comes in terms of connectivity, onboarding time to value, tracking compliance, tracking consistency. So if we think about ELDs and telematics, those GPS enabled devices, the European Union really started off in saying, we need to track our trucks, we need to track our drivers for hours of service or driving bans. Then the US had their own ELD mandate in terms of hours of service. Canada is implementing their own ELD mandate this summer. So right now they don't really have one. In the future, they're going to have an ELD mandate. And that's great because connecting into the ELDs is one of the best ways to provide visibility. You mentioned Japan, and Japan's an example of a country that's highly advanced, highly sophisticated, has some of the most efficient operations I've ever seen. But they do not require ELD style devices, either legally or commercially. So one of the challenges that Project 44 has to solve with our customers is, how do we do over-the-road tracking in Japan where our primary and sometimes secondary tracking or connection methods are unavailable? How do we do that? And that's a challenge that we're working on solving, and it's an interesting challenge to be part of. But to your point, there are differences by mode that we have to solve, that we have to digitize for our customers. But then there are also differences in geography that we have to solve. And when you think about ELD or the different industries, some modes and some geographies have both problems. So you have to digitize both before you can provide that visibility to the customer. So that's what's exciting. But those are challenges that we're actively working on solving globally.
And it's overwhelming at times, right? So if you think about the scope of the problem and scope of the industry itself, what keeps you and I interested and passionate about supply chain in general, the flip side of it is overwhelming at times. That where do you start and what kind of problems you attack first, and where are you going to get more traction than the others? So as you think about the future, Christian, and maybe for Project 44 as well as just for supply chain in general, where do you think this is going? Like 4 years, 5 years down the road, in terms of visibility, what's your expectation from the industry? Maybe we talk about US, and in general, we talk about all the global operations.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said earlier, that the answer to the question of where's my shipment, that's possible to answer right now. And I tell this to prospects and customers all the time, is it's possible to answer that right now, but it's only going to be interesting to you for the first 6 or 12 months. Now you know where your truck is, you know where your ship is, you know when your airplane's going to land. That's all interesting. Like, what do you do with what's next? What do you do with that data? And I think that's really what customers have to think about, is what's next? How do I digitize more processes? And then once you get to digitization, you get to automation. It's difficult to automate a non-digital process. Then I think, further into the future, sometimes I think AI and ML are buzzwords. Other times I think they are truly possible in the, next year or two. But I don't think it makes sense to train a computer to do manual processes if digitization is possible. As the global supply chain evolves, and it's been evolving for years, the number of decisions, the number of permutations, the number of disruptions that can happen there's so many different combinations that can happen. For example, woven fabrics coming from China. If there's a flood in China, how might that impact the ability to have PPE in Chicago? Those are things that are possible to contemplate, but every piece in that process has to be digital. And then you can get into conversations about AI and ML for supply chain. The one last comment I want to make here is, EDI was really started with the Berlin Airlift, and then it was commercialized in the 70s and 80s. So right now in 2021, anyone that's leveraging EDI and talking about all their investment in EDI and how they want to advance their EDI connections, that's 40-year-old technology at best. It's not going to get you where you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years. It just won't. So, APIs is what Project 44 uses, and those are two-way conversations. They're more efficient. So if in 50 years, people are talking about P44 the way we talk about EDI now, like that would be a huge success for P44. And that's really where I think that the future is for supply chain and Project 44.
Well said. I think many of the times, I think the primary impetus for getting onto the technological journey, I think that creates all these offshoots and different uses. One of the things I think we are fortunate of, and it's timely, right? So whatever is happening with COVID-19 and the challenges in vaccine delivery, as well as the PPE and other supplemental stuff delivery, the hope is that some of the technological innovations that you guys are driving and maybe the economics in the commercial space are very different, but that's creating the trigger to do those kind of technological changes will also help ultimately the global health and other industries, and will drive some change and the benefits of agility in those other sectors as well. Any closing thoughts on that, Christian? The non-commercial, non-retail, non-e-commerce world of global health and the deliveries of vaccines and other life-saving medicines, and the importance of visibility and what you might be seeing in that space.
Yeah, I think, specific to the vaccine, the science behind the drug itself is amazing. And I don't understand any of it, but I'm sure it is amazing. My fiance is vaccinated. I'm still waiting, but that's phenomenal. One of the things I think that's pretty interesting, though, is all the other things that go into the vaccine, where that medical grade glass comes from, where the medical grade steel comes from to inject the vaccine, actually deliver the vaccine, where all that comes from. Some of that stuff is mined outside of the United States. So it's truly a global supply chain to deliver that vaccine to your arm. I think the other piece that's interesting that has to be thought about is Michelle, my fiance, she just went to the University of Chicago hospitals right next to her work, right next to her office for her vaccine. But I've heard stories, and it kind of makes sense that if you live in a more rural community, or you're not close to a world-class research hospital like the University of Chicago, you might have to drive 45 minutes for your vaccine. In the future, is that going to be good enough? How might we deliver these things in the future, or bring a lot of products and services that city dwellers have to more suburban or rural environments?
If you think about non-US and non-advanced economics kind of countries, so let's take sub-Saharan Africa. It's not 45-minute drive. It might be more, and it's not limited to vaccines, but in general, the medicine supplies and other supplies related to the global health, the problem becomes compounded pretty quickly, and importance of visibility becomes that much more important. So I think even from the narrower sense of transportation visibility, that has huge implications and huge benefits to that sector. So I think to close the interview, this was great, Christian. By the way, I mean, like always, talking to you is always educational for me in regards. So thanks for being my go-to guy for anything and everything transportation. But thanks a lot for taking time out. Fascinating discussion. We'll continue chatting, and have a great time down in Mexico.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harshad. I appreciate the time.